You are now listening to the Serious Growth Podcast with your host, Leo Costa Jr.
Welcome to Serious Growth Podcast, where the truth will be told. On the show today, we have Rob Terry. Rob, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, same to you. I really do appreciate you coming on. The first time I didn't meet you, but I saw you, but you were hard to miss because you're so. How tall are you? By the way?
6'4".
Yeah, you're 6'4", and I met you at the Las Vegas Natural Olympia show. Yep. And then as it turned out, because our company actually sponsored the event, then I actually stood right next to you and Ricardo. Right.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what, you're even bigger when you stand that close to you. My goodness. So you have an impressive bio, to say the least. I wanted to ask you, though, you said here you're originally from Wales, huh? UK?
Yeah. So, Wales is my home. I moved to America in 2008, and that's where I came over for professional wrestling, essentially. So that's kind of what brought me to America, and I've been over here ever since. We make frequent trips back to the UK like twice a year, but I've been over here for the majority of the time.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, because I talked to a guy from Norway the other day. In the UK, from where you're from, is bodybuilding very popular, or is it more like the strength sports over there?
It's a pure mix. It's, a lot of people work out there. Everyone's into their training. You do get a mix of people who are into like the powerlifting and even strongmen and everything else.
Yeah.
But there are quite a few individuals who are very actively involved in the bodybuilding as well. So, and I was one of those guys, so.
Yeah. I traveled over to Eastern Europe in the late 80s, probably early 90s now. I wrote these training courses for bodybuilding back then. It was Bulgarian Burst, Serious Growth. I had a few that we wrote, and I was really into that side of it. And what I noticed was, their thing over there was Olympic lifting. That was huge.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And in fact, to the point where it's, they said that the reason why they focused on those types of events is because those guys were like rock stars over there. If you were an Olympic lifter, and oh man, they said that it even though they had the information as far as what was the best way to train for mass, they just focused in that area. So you started, how old were you when you started training?
I was way young, probably a lot younger than I would influence people. I was maybe, I actually came, it's funny because everything really came full circle for me, and I said that in my issue of, in the Iron Man magazine, and then obviously with Generation Iron, we talked about that. But I was lucky enough as a young kid, when I was 13 years old, I came to Florida, and we vacationed here, and I was with my family, and we stayed in a hotel, and I had a gym there. And that was the first time my dad he's not really into working out a whole bunch. He kind of knows his way around just a little bit, but not too much. And, we did the theme parks one day. And I think that day we did a break where we came back to the hotel. We were going to go jump in the pool, but we went to the gym first. And I remember we did some legs, and I started doing a leg extension machine. And my quadriceps just started gorging up with blood. And, I was young. I was like 13 years old.
Yeah.
And, there were probably a lot of influences around that age for me personally as well. Like watching professional wrestling, the WWF, and, even the cartoons back then, all the cartoon characters were jacked.
Yeah.
So I started working out and feeling the sensation, and that's kind of where everything sort of started for me. I was so intrigued by it, the feeling of it, the feeling of the power, how powerful it felt.
Yeah.
And then everything sort of started from there, really. I sort of came back after that. I just wanted to know more. So 13 years old, that was pretty young for me, and probably a little too young that I'd recommend for other people, but.
Well, the funny thing that you're saying that, though, because when I went, part of my tours over because I went to Eastern Europe several times, like I said, at that time, Bulgarians were dominating Olympic sports. So I was very fascinated by them. They had some really interesting ideas. But one of the tours I went on was actually for prepubescent athletes.
Okay.
There's a lot of information about that. So 13 years of age is actually not too young. The key there is you got to know what you're doing. And
Sure.
yeah, I was actually training after I did one of those tours like that. I actually started training kids as young as 10 years old. But
Right.
again, the emphasis was on calisthenics and
Right.
slash weight training, and not do all this heavy lifting with it.
That's exactly what I try and hit home. I don't try and tell them what I did, because that wouldn't necessarily be correct. Because even at 13, I didn't have a vast knowledge of, or what I was doing. I was just feeling everything around. The advantage that I did have was that even at the age of 13, from 13 to 14, I was a big kid. I was one of the biggest kids in my school. So when I started going to the gym, which was around a year later after that, all the big guys loved me. The biggest guys in the gym, they would just say, this guy there, guess how old he is? And, they'd say 18 years old. And they're like, nope, he's 14 years old.
Amazing.
So they would all sort of be super magnetized by me, and they'd want to share their training routines and tell me. So I had an input to all the knowledge immediately as to the way people train and everything like that. But the problem that came with that was somewhat like what the internet is today, is that I was thrown so many different variations of training. This guy would tell me how he would train chest, and then this guy would tell me how he would train chest. So it was really up to me to sort of work with my body and kind of see which routine sort of worked the best, and I kind of took components of what was good and then threw away what didn't. And so that's kind of how I got into that. But yeah, I was no pro at 13 years old. Let me tell you that.
Oh, it takes a long time, as we know. But that's funny that how you got into that, because I'm always interested how people get into it. And like with me, it was about the magazines. Reading all the magazines. This was before, and when I was doing it was before the internet was getting. I mean, it was kind of popular, but nothing like it is today. So mine was just reading about. I got into it because I, out of college, all of a sudden I was in the worst shape of my life, and I'd been an athlete forever. And it's like, I got to do something. And so one of my buddies told me, hey, where'd you start weightlifting? So anyway, it was about getting that information through the magazines. But like you're saying, it was almost worse, because as you're reading and getting all these different opinions of how to, it's like it almost gets more confusing.
Right.
But, and it's like, but the way that you learned it and the way that I learned it is, in the end, is actually the best way. It's best to learn it from firsthand experience.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
It's just that making sure that at least initially that your form and technique is right and that you're not getting hurt. But I mean, when you can learn it the way you and I did, that's definitely the best way. Now you really understand how it applies to your body, because there's so many doggone ways, that's for sure. Okay, so you got started that way. So what led you into you started training at 13 or 14? Did you play any sports back then?
Yeah, I was really, really into sports. Back over there, I used to play rugby as a kid, soccer, athletics. I was really big into martial arts. Bruce Lee was kind of one of my idols. Again, that kind of transcended, because at that time, you had all these action movie stars again. And, obviously I was way younger than the age rating, which was 18 to see these movies. Yeah. But, I'd see them anyway. And that was a huge impact on my life. I'd see the Jean-Claude Van Damme, the Dolph Lundgren, all these sort of characters who were extremely agile, but at the same time, they looked phenomenal. What I mean? Their bodies were just, I would look at them. I know, obviously, of course, Arnold, in the movies, all those of professional wrestling, gladiators, and then the action movie stars. That was such a huge driving force into my mind as to how I thought or believed that I needed to look. That was very ingrained into me from a very early age. And subconsciously, when I started weight training, I realized that was the way to do it. So I was so magnetized and compelled to doing that. It became second nature.
Yeah, it sounds like that like the definite imprint into your brain.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious. You said something that you weren't old enough to see those movies. Is it because it was too violent in terms of action, or
Yeah, I mean, like back then, they got an age rating on films and stuff. And most of Arnold's films were, I think, like the Terminator, for example. I mean, that I remember watching that movie and it was just something else. But that was you had to be 18 years old to see that. And, me and my friends, we'd all kind of get together and we'd have video night. And one of the things we do is we'd watch movies that were, maybe a lot older than what we should be watching them. But we sort of we were able to watch these films, and they just, they really affected me.
Yeah.
The power of the way that they looked. And that's the way that I wanted to look. And that's the way I wanted to be. And even to this day, it's never stopped. I love it.
Well, and the thing about that is you got to have a stated goal. You have to have something that motivates you and drives you. And your story is just, you're saying it in that way. That was something that just, that was it. You knew, and you were hell bent on doing that. I can tell that, after you, I guess I'm curious as to did you get into then before you ever started competing, did you get into the wrestling federation?
No, I didn't. So I was a really, really big wrestling fan. So in the UK, there's a big time difference. There's like a 5-hour time difference. So just to give you an example, they have pay-per-views, which would be on, I want to say like 9 o'clock over here. So that's close to like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and they'd probably finish at like 3 or 4 in the morning. So me and my friends were all big fans. We'd stay up and we'd watch that all the time. So that was that. Can you repeat that question one more time? Sorry.
No, I was asking you.
Where are we going with this? I don't know which way I'm going with
that. I was asking you if you got into the wrestling first.
Right. Okay. No. Yes. So big fan. We'd watch all the pay-per-views, all the live TVs, and everything in the UK. And again, I'd measure myself up to the biggest guys on TV, and that was a huge motivator for my training. Even in my 20s, when I was actually bodybuilding at that point, because I started my first show when I was 18. That was my first bodybuilding show when I won Junior Mr. Wales. So yes, so I started the bodybuilding first, but I was a huge fan of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
But what happened for me was I was trying to get into the field of professional wrestling, but back in that day, it was unheard of how you'd get into it. It was very, very sort of, you really had to know someone who was in the business in order to get in there.
Very tight culture.
Yeah, absolutely. As today it's a little different. There are so many wrestling schools out there right now. I can name several in the area that I live in, Florida. So you obviously just do the circuits, and if you're good and you keep going, you might get called up. But back in the day when I was a big fan, it was just unheard of. So I would send off tapes to America because they had a program called Tough Enough, and my accent right now is very. It's reduced a lot and very Americanized as well. Back then, maybe if I sent the tapes off, they probably couldn't even understand me. I don't know. But it was one of those things where I was trying to get into the company, but I never heard back. But then I thought, it was really, really important to me to become a natural professional pro. So I just kept on following that course, carried on competing every single year, and then it was just being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
I was at the Musclemania Worlds in 2006. We were at the weigh-ins, and I was sitting next to my wife, and this lady just comes and sits down on the other side, and I was like, oh my God, this may not go well. I don't know what's going to happen right here. But she introduced herself to me, and she says, hey, I'm from the WWE. I think you got a great look. You've got a presence, and we'd love to consider you and offer you a wrestling contract. By this point, my jaw hit the floor. You know what I mean? And like I say to a lot of people, if it wasn't, the natural, I owe so much to natural bodybuilding, because I would have never have had that opportunity if I hadn't have, just been competing at these bodybuilding shows.
Yeah.
Because it was just such the right place and the right time, and that's how it opened up for me, and I got the professional wrestling contract. I met Vince McMahon, did a little tryout in London, which took forever to happen, but eventually when it did, then I met all the superstars, which is that's a story in its own. I'm meeting the guys who I've been idolizing on TV most of my youth, And now I'm having dinner with them all. You know what I mean?
Oh
So
my
it was a
goodness.
pretty cool and surreal experience that opened up so many doors for me.
Yeah. The thing about that is you just don't know when how things are going to pan out, the timeline of things. And
Hmm.
sometimes you just have to follow your passion,
Yeah,
and then the rest kind of falls in, it's like you didn't expect that. And then
1000%. You're absolutely
boom,
right.
then all of a sudden you're at the right place at the right time. But you know what? If you hadn't followed your dream and your passion, you would have
Hmm.
never had that experience. It would have
Nope,
been something else, but not that one.
absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's kind of interesting. I've told my people sometimes, I said, look, you got to be willing to do the work to begin with and follow your passion. And then you got to be willing to open up that next door. You never know which doors is going to open up another door for you. The fact that
Right.
you were competing in all these shows, that's what did it. And you were
Hmm.
found, and I think that she's
Yeah,
right. You do have a presence and you do have a look. I'm not surprised that she said that to you, but what an opportunity to
it
all of a
was.
sudden,
Yeah.
to meet your idols, because the same thing actually happened to me as well. But talking about Vince McMahon, and this is how I met Platts. I wrote like a second version of the training courses that we were writing, and I thought, I need to network this thing, and you need to be around the guys and around
Hmm.
that environment to have a better chance to talk to them. So I just decided to get on a plane, and I flew to Germany, not knowing what the heck I was doing. Well, long story short, I just followed the 5 guys that were on their way over there to do the FIBO in
Right.
Germany. And well, guess who was picking these guys up at the airport? It was Platts, and he saw that I looked like I was just straggling along because I didn't know where I was going. And he said, "Hey, do you need a ride?" And that's where Tom and I began our relationship. But at that time, I'm sure you remember the WBF.
I do. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Well, Vince McMahon he had that at that time. Tom was the face of that organization during those days. And, of course, I was looking for somebody that I could get on their coattails with stuff that I was doing. And it was Tom. I'd say, hey, man, I'd like you to check out my book, and I'd like you to be the face for our deal. He said, well, I can't. I got a contract with Vince. And, a year later, sure enough, Tom and I hooked up. But yeah, that's where I met Tom, was at that Vince McMahon where he had the WBF.
Hmm.
That didn't last too long, that organization.
I don't think it did. No, but I remember that clearly.
Yeah.
Again, that was the era when just everything was happening.
Yeah. And
I remember being around that.
yeah. And then what Vince actually did, which I thought was smart, is he gave all the competitors, I think there were like 8 or 9 guys that he brought on as kind of the first group in that organization. And he gave them like all certain names. Like did you have like a name in when you were doing your pro wrestling? I'm sure you did, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was very lucky in professional wrestling. They actually kept my name,
Uh-huh.
but they just add something on to it. Like
Yeah.
the freak Rob Terry.
Yeah.
The Welsh Warrior, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, they used my name, which I was one of the very, very few guys they did that. Most of the time, they did change the name totally.
Like a stage name, right?
Yeah. But I was lucky. They keep my real name and then add something after or before it. So
Yeah.
I guess,
Yeah.
So that was a plus of me, because they got to keep my name. So.
Yeah, and so I thought what Vince was doing was kind of smart, because he was using a platform with wrestling that was working, and he was trying to make that crossover and they actually had the right intention for this thing, because they wanted to make bodybuilding a natural
They
event.
make sort of personalities, right?
Yeah.
Out of the bodybuilding, maybe because the industry was very bland, I guess.
Yeah.
With the bodybuilding personality, so he was trying to add the personas.
Exactly.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, and smart.
That's great.
Of course, the other thing that he wanted to do was the WBF was to be a natural, platform. And
okay,
it just didn't work out. I think Vince was just maybe ahead of his time. I'm not really quite sure. One of the things I did know that because I happened to be during those days was, have you heard of a guy by the name of Mauro Di Pasquale?
No, I might have, but off the top, I can't match a face to that name.
Yeah, and him and I wrote this book called The Anabolic Diet. Okay. And he also wrote other books. A Ketogenic Diet is also Mauro. But during those days, it was just when this was going on, And Mara was trying to incorporate and implement that idea of how to utilize the high-fat diet to help these guys stay natural. And part of the reason that, in that industry where the guys are enhancing, it's a freak show. And there's a small cult that likes to come and see that. That sport, I don't think, has actually grown. In fact, if anything, it's gotten less popular, in my opinion. And I think it's because they've gotten to the point where most people can't relate to that. As big as you were and as great a shape as you were in, I think that people think that, this is something that I could belong to, or I could get into, where some of these guys, it was just off the charts and ridiculous,
Right.
But, and part of the reason why I just think that the guys couldn't come in at that time any better is because they really didn't buy into that philosophy of changing the way you eat to help your body look better. And with that being said, you were in great condition. So how did you get yourself in that kind of shape? Somebody who's as tall and as big as you kind of remind me of Lou Ferrigno, how big and tall he was, And I think the disadvantage for you guys that are so tall like that, it takes a lot more work to fill you all in.
Yeah, and I'm very realistic with that, and it's extremely impressive, when you do see a big guy who is, fully complete and everything else like that. But, obviously when you're standing next to a guy who's, like 5'10", it's and they, it's sometimes it's a lot easier maybe for them to fill their shape out versus you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but it's a challenge, I get it. And it's just, it is hard, but it's just something that I'll keep doing and keep trying to add to my physique and bring it in, the best I can at every show I do. Always set a challenge of coming in better than last show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am a tall guy, I'm 6'4". In terms of coming in condition and everything else like that, I really try and stay in the best possible shape I can all year round. And again, they called me on TV the freak of nature, and that's basically because I can naturally hold such a big weight. My off-season weight is between 275 and 280 pounds, and I can hold that pretty easy.
Yeah.
So that in a gym world is pretty shredded. But then when you bring that to especially a natural bodybuilding stage where, the guys are not going to have enormous amounts of mass, but they're going to be in insane condition.
Yeah.
That's the game that I'm challenged at, is to really come down and get every single muscle group striated for that show. So I basically, I try this time. I normally do a 12-month cut, 12-week cut. But this time I did a 16-week cut. So I added just a little bit more time. I never really do a whole bunch of cardio. I try and keep my cardio as minimal as possible. I use that just as a tool. If I feel I'm lagging or I'm behind on myself, I really sort of concentrate on diet.
Yeah.
Diet is pretty much everything to me. It's a macro-based controlled diet where I don't really suppress one food group. I'll try and keep everything in a synergy of, the carbs, proteins, and fats, and everything will be there. It's all, the best choices of everything I can get. And I'll just add that in and constantly monitor it. And I'll do a 5-day cycle where it'll be sort of 5 days low and then 2 days high. And that just works really well, and my body responds to that. I'm able to drop continuously going into the show.
Yeah, when you say 5 days, 2 days high and 2 days low, you mean the amount of calories that you're taking in?
It's a carbohydrate based, but obviously that's going to affect the ultimate the caloric intake as well.
So you're carb cycling is what you're doing at that point.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Do you do that for the whole time that you're doing your cut? You said you're 16 or 18 weeks this time?
It was a 16. Yeah.
Okay. So were you carb cycling throughout that whole 16?
The entire time that was a carb cycle. I really didn't have any diet breaks. I felt really good the entire time. Like I said, this was the hardest I probably ever pushed. in terms of coming down the lowest.
Yeah.
Like we discussed previously, you know, it was a 42-pound drop, so that's a lot. Yeah, it was. But like I said, it was towards the end, you know, it was a little rough, I guess, but the entire journey of that wasn't too bad.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned something that when I was talking to Tony Pearson, I just had him on. This guy was ripped to shreds. I mean, what he told me is this. He goes, he said, I never wanted to be big, like these mass monsters, you know?
Yeah.
Not that he necessarily could. If you take a look at his physique, maybe someday, he had a very classical physique. He's about, I'd say between 5'9" and 5'10", something like that.
Okay.
You know? And by the way, I think that, in my opinion, the taller guy versus the guy who's 5'10", like you mentioned, I think it's an apple and an orange, you know? And I think back in the day, they used to have in actually height classes because of what you're talking about, because it is, I mean, it's almost stacked against the big guy until he puts all those years in. But, you know, but Tony said it wasn't about, for him, it wasn't about getting big. It was about getting shredded to the bone. As you know, when you are shredded to the bone, you can be a lot smaller, actually, than a guy that's a mass monster that comes in a bit smooth. And it's like, when they come off the stage, it's like you don't even recognize that person. He even said that. People would look at him after the show and they go, man, you're small. You know, but yet on stage, because he was so, I mean, he has striations upon striations. And I think that's kind of where you're going with this thing.
And, you know, I've been, you know, like I said, I've been competing for a long time. I think in total, I want to say I've ended about 35 shows. So it's been a lot. And, you know, there have been times, like I said, it's very easy for me to get big in my off season and just maintain that. And I've had that mindset before where I'm like, hey, you know, well, I'm 6'4", I'm 280 pounds. I'm going to be the biggest guy on that stage. And that's been my mentality. And, you know, I've learned from experience that doesn't work and it won't work out. You know what I mean? So you need to bring that insane condition, because if you can bring a combination of the both, then that will make you. But, having that mindset, which I think some people do, you know, they'll learn that that's not the way that it works.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I learned that from Tom Platz, because, you know, I was training, and this is kind of after I had met him and all that. And he actually took me under his wing. I said, Tom, I've gone as far as I can go, as far as the information that I have. And so he took me under his wing. And that's one of the things I learned from Tom. He says, you know, it's better to come in a little bit smaller than you want, because, you know, I don't know about you, man, but I just, in the off season, especially early on, it was like, how big can I get? I'm 5'10", shorter now because I'm older, but 5'10" at that time when I was doing this, I got up as high as 300 pounds, you know? Yeah. But so my first time that I did all this, and then I started cutting, I did like you did, but I lost too much weight, Rob. And when I came in, I was too depleted, you know? So I found that, and again, through Tom, was never to get too far out in the off season. You know, if I could just see my abs a little bit, I was okay.
Sure.
25 to 30 pounds seemed to work okay for me. But that time that I lost 50 pounds for that one show, I pretty much lost kind of my gains that I had made in the off season.
Right.
So did you feel like you and sometimes you have to sacrifice some lean weight to come in as ripped as you want to be? Would you say that?
So the way that you're absolutely right. You know what I mean? I think, you know, the way that I'll approach this is that everyone is different, you know, and, you know, I'll have abs all the way through be 280. I'm very genetically gifted, like I said, with that. But I do have areas that need to come down, and they are stubborn areas. So in order for me to bring that in, like I said, my areas would be my back. So my back would probably be the last area that would get shredded. Yeah. And obviously, you know, like you and I will both agree that a lot of shows are won from the back. So I've got to keep coming down until that back is absolutely crisp. And it's just, unfortunately, that weight will come from other areas. So it's a give or take situation, you know. That's right. Either I come in fuller, but my back is slightly softer, or I come in where my back is absolutely shredded. And that was the goal that I really had for myself going into this past show, was that no matter what, I want every single muscle group absolutely striated. Yep. So it would be rippling everywhere. You know, that was kind of my goal. And you know, maybe that was a compromise of maybe losing some muscle tissue. I'm aware of that. But it was just, that was my goal, and I was hell bent set on doing it. So
Yeah. No, you were in great condition. It's funny that you say how there's certain, we're different that way. How the last part that comes off is, for you, it's the back. For me,
yeah,
it was always like my inside part of my leg. I had this,
right.
that, and my lower abs. I mean, I had to keep, that was my sort of the telltale for me. So I just, I would keep going until that, finally, and it was kind of nerve wracking because it was the last thing that finally came in.
The good thing is, that, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think a lot of people don't know that, it's really important for you to know your own body and where you need to really work on, and where where to gauge when you're in condition. And I think that's what really separates a lot of people, so if you know that, your areas where you need to really come in on, that puts you just ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't really know that, and they're just winging everything. So.
Well, and you know what? It takes, again, as a bodybuilder, this, you have to be willing to put the time in to find that out, because you just don't find that out,
No.
And but that was kind of funny. When you're talking about not doing much cardio, how much cardio would you do? Give us an example, like how many days a week, or how long would you actually?
When I tell people this, they don't really like the answer, but it's probably did 2 weeks of cardio, and it was maybe 3 days of the week. And I think that was eight weeks in. And for whatever reason, I might've got a little stressed one day and thought, man, I need to drop more, and I need to drop faster,
Yeah.
But the reality was I was coming in fine anyway, but it was just the 2 weeks. And it was like 20 minutes. Like I said, for me, the way I look at cardio, and this is just myself, everyone's different, but cardio is a tool for me where, again, I'd much rather start off absolutely minimalistic, and then if I need to, I'll just build on it. Because my workouts generally, my workouts are maybe a little longer than other people's. They're usually 2 to 2.5, possibly 3 hours. And when I do that, it's really not a lot of talking time. I really prefer to train on my own. And when I do, I really isolate myself from everyone else. I'll have my headphones on. Someone comes up and I'll talk to me. I'll talk to them, but I'll try and get away from them as fast as I can.
Right.
And it's really, maybe Arnold, back in the day, I know he did a lot of volume. It's something that my body has climatized to. And I've been doing it for such a long time. I'm not saying it's the right way. I'm not saying for someone who's just starting off, it's what they need to do. They probably absolutely don't. But I do a lot of volume, super high intensity, a lot of sets. So maybe, an outsider looking in at my training could say, well, he doesn't really do cardio, but he's training for such a long time, and there's such a lot of high intensity going on that he's burning X amount of calories doing that. That's the only way I can look at it and sort of justify that. But, if it means that it keeps me off a step mill for 20, 30 minutes a day, then I'll take that. So,
yeah. I know cardio is a nightmare for me too. The thing is, I don't know if you heard of this guy now. This guy was called the Iron Guru. His name is Vince Gironda. Have you heard of that name?
I have, yes.
Okay. I have the great pleasure of training in his North Hollywood studio. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. It was, I'll tell you, Rob, I'm going to tell you, to say it was interesting is an understatement. And Vince was a character, man. He didn't believe in doing any cardio. In fact, in his gym, he had no cardio equipment.
Sure.
And the story with Vince was, the guys that came over from Europe and the guys that wanted to be somebody like they came to Vince's gym because Vince was the one that actually sort of put them on the right path. And then they would ship them over. They called it to Weiderland, over the Joe Weider Muscle Mag. Yeah, and they would promote them there. But Vince, with Vince, it was like no cardio. He had no cardio in his gym. It was about manipulating like what you're doing. But, the thing about it is I think what you're saying is so important. There's so many ways to skin that cat, because I can tell you this from a physiological standpoint. This is where I learned at the Bulgarians. They said the key is not to overtrain to begin with. And some people would say you being in the gym doing weight training for 2 to 3 hours, that would be severely overtraining,
Sure.
But yet your body responds to that. So it's not necessarily a black and white,
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, you would say, the Bulgarians said, look, they train 5 times a day. Of course, they had very low reps, high intensity, meaning a lot of weight, because they were training for the Olympic lifting. So it was a different dynamic. So they never trained longer than 20 to 30 minutes at one time, but they trained 5 times a day. And they said, as long as you're not overtraining the system, because I said 5 times a day, for goodness sake. He said, well, if you don't overtrain to begin with, your body can tolerate that because it can recover sooner. But look, what a beautiful thing, because you have your way of doing it, and look how you ended up looking, and on top of that, a natural.
Sure.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. What about I know you said your diet was based on around the macros, but for example, how high was your protein intake?
So again, right. So maybe a good point to hit home is that at the age of 8, I had a kidney removed. So I had an accident about 6 months before I had the kidney removed, where I had a wheel of a truck go over my pelvis, fractured my pelvis, and then 6 months later I had the kidney removed. So I only have 1 kidney. So that a lot of we talk natural bodybuilding before I go into that with protein levels. But from the age where I really got engrossed in sort of all these sort of figures and movies and professional wrestling and everything else that sort of lured me in to that awesomeness of looking the way that they did, I was forced only one route. If I was ever going to do this, it was going to be lifetime natural. Otherwise, I'm not going to live very long.
Yeah.
So that sort of still affects me to this day. Because number one, I don't drink alcohol. And if I do, it'll be 1 glass of wine, and extremely infrequently, maybe once or twice a year. And that would be my wife to celebrate something maybe.
Yeah.
But in terms of protein levels, that's really important for me as well. I know there's a lot of bodybuilders, natural or not natural, and they really do exceed on that protein level because they believe that will sort of get them that one step closer to building X amount of muscle on. So I really measure my protein intake. It's on a daily basis. When I'm dieting, my protein intake is what was it? It was around about 300 grams of protein in my off season. I want to say, I can't remember my exact figures now. I want to say it was closer to 280, 260 grams of protein. And again, it wouldn't come all from meat. It would come from all the foods, like obviously like vegetables, they have traces and everything else like that. Even carb sources.
Yeah.
So I'd be factoring all that in, which would reduce the meat content that I'd be having as well, just to make it easier on my kidneys and everything else as well. So I really have to sort of pay close attention to that and, get regular blood work just to make sure that I'm healthy. So that's a factor that I don't exceed on that.
Yeah.
So
understandable for sure. Well, but still, even with that being said, you're taking in about 1 gram per one pound of protein.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So I at least try to cover my body weight and more. So,
Oh yeah. And actually, do you remember a guy by the name of Mike Mincer?
I absolutely do.
Okay.
Yes.
Heavy duty. Well, I got to know Mike pretty well. He was somebody that I was drawn to. I met him at a Vegas show many, many years ago, and so Mike was big on, he didn't think that you needed more than a half a gram per 1 pound of body weight.
Right. Okay.
So there's a lot of controversy about that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, when I was in Bulgaria, because I dealt with all the sports doctors for the Olympic team. I had a really bird's eye view of all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
And they were big on, they said, when you're as intense as we are, you need to eat 3 to 4 grams of protein per 1 pound of body weight. So that was their belief back then. So during that time, it was like Mike Mincer was saying, half a gram. And he was pretty intense. I mean, he did that heavy duty system. And so I thought that was just, again, it's like, at the end of the day, you have to experiment on your own body. And
absolutely right. Yeah.
Come into these different shows trying to, and the thing with that sport is that you have to go almost the whole year by the time it's
Right.
all said and done to find out if the darn thing works for you or not. So, there's a reason why it takes that many years to get up on stage at the national or world level, because it's just a slow learning process, But okay, so now let's go back to the was it WWE?
Yeah, at the time, it was the WWE. So
Okay, and
mhm.
and you said you're having dinner with all these superstars. So who was it that stood out in your mind? That was a guy that just. I mean, I'm sure there's more than one, but
Oh
is there
yeah.
one guy that stands out that that you met and that influenced you as far as in the ring?
Yeah, and again, it's really hard to pinpoint one because, like I said, I was really, I wasn't just a fan; I was a really, really big fan. So yeah, there were a lot of guys. I mean, I think closer to the time that I got brought in with the WWE, I remember I'd watch a lot of wrestling and Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, if you know who he is, and Dave Bautista, who's actually one of the action stars right now.
Yeah.
So I was a really big fan of those guys, getting into the industry because they were on the up. They were on TV all the time, and they were big guys, so I could relate to them.
Yeah.
So to sort of meet them, and I've actually got to hang out with Dave quite a few times. He lives here in Florida as well. So that was just pretty awesome, and when you meet these guys that you were idolizing them, when they were doing their thing and wrestling, and I was a fan, and to meet them and they're such good people, what I mean? That just makes it so much better. You know what I mean? It's
night and
it's
day.
a really
Night and day.
It's really cool, to sort of to get to know them, you know what I mean? And everything else. So it comes full circle, so it was pretty awesome.
So I'm really curious about something because maybe other people have asked this as far as in that sport. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I know that the kind of moves that you guys make in that ring is, I mean, it's it's choreographed to some degree, but you have to be an athlete to be able to do that regardless. So, is it fake or is it real? Can we answer? Can we finally get a black and white answer?
So I'll give you a pretty good answer. It's all predetermined, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very predetermined, but it's defined fake, I remember one time when I was wrestling with Impact Wrestling on Spike TV, and I took a chair shot to the head, and my family, they were never really big wrestling fans, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as soon as I got into the industry, they became my number one fans. They'd watch it every single week in the UK. They'd videotape every single episode, and they constantly go through with a remote control till they found my match, and then they'd show all the neighbors when they came over. And this one time, they saw the chair shot, and it was pretty bad, and I ended up bleeding from the top of my head, which wasn't, I didn't need stitches. It was just something that happened. The guy hit me slightly wrong, and it was what it was. And I had to tell my parents that it was a fake chair, but I had to tell my wife the same thing as well. But the reality was, it was a steel chair that you just pick up at Home Depot. So the chair shot itself was very real. It's just everything sort of predetermined. A lot of the blows that we take in the falls, it's as real as it can be. The ring has a recoil to it.
Yeah.
But it's, when you fall on that and you do your training in the ring, the next day you'll feel it like the first time you've probably been to football practice and you get beat up and you got these bruises all over your body. It's extremely physical.
Yeah.
And a high risk for anything to happen.
Yeah.
So it's
it's
a crazy industry.
Yeah, and I'm in athletics, so I know that it takes to make something like that look is that real.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of practice that goes into that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you that too. Is like when you're going in to wrestle, let's just say one person, another wrestler. Are you guys actually training with each other to predetermine how the show's going to go, or how does that work?
It depends. It depends on both of you guys training at the end of the day. If you've both been trained and, you've both been working a good amount of time, you can just talk about, you know, what's going to be good, what's going to be good for the fans, and just go out and do it. You know,
Yeah.
it's as simple as that. As where maybe if you got a guy who's pretty new in the industry, then maybe you need to spend a little bit more time and just make sure that you don't get hurt and that he doesn't get hurt at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
you know, in the fashion industry, I've actually, since I've gotten out of the sport of bodybuilding, and I won't go into how and why I got into this, but I mean, actually, I wrote a book to teach men how to dress.
mm-hmm.
After I got out of bodybuilding,
Yeah.
Rob, I just didn't have that. I mean, I train every single day. I'm just an old guy having a good time in the gym now, you know, compared to what I used to do. But I didn't realize how much the stage motivated me as far as my training was concerned, because it kicked it up another level, knowing that you're going to compete with a bunch of guys, you know. And then when you're not doing that anymore, it's like, oh, you know, I kind of like the idea of getting in that kind of shape. And, you know, well, anyway, long story. So I got into this fashion thing, and the Italians have a term, because I'm really influenced by the way the Italian men's fashion is. Okay.
Okay.
They call it sprezzatura.
Okay.
Sprezzatura means it's studied carelessness. It's making the hard look easy. And you know, referring this back to what in the sport that you're in, you know, people that make things look easy, usually it's really hard. And to make something hard look easy is a boatload of work that you got to put into it. You know, if you get somebody who's a newbie that gets on stage, they're not going to make it look like you guys do at that level.
No. I remember when I first started off in the industry, you know, Leo, and I can't tell you how hard it was. I guess, I mean, I was always I am still a humble guy. But the thing was, I didn't realize actually how much work was needed to be a professional wrestler. I just thought in my mind that because I'm big, you know, I'm 280 pounds, I'm 6'4", I'm one of the bigger guys in the industry. This is going to be easy for me. You know, I'm going to grab a guy and I'm throw him over there. He's going to come off the ropes. I'm going to hit him there. And it really didn't work out for me like that. You know what I mean? And I was humbled myself on the amount of work that I really had to put in. And, you know, when I got signed with the WWE and I was training with these guys, you know, I'd be gone it was like a 9 till 5 deal where, you know, I'd be in a training facility and I'd come home to my wife and she was like, what happened to you? And, you know, I would be dripping wet with sweat. And my entire body felt like it had just been through, you know, like a meat grinder or something like that. You know what I mean? It was brutal. Because you've really got to master every single move that you could possibly do or that someone else could do to you. And, you know, a lot of people don't realize it, but in the world of professional wrestling, a lot of the moves that they do, you know, if someone pulls on you slightly harder than they should, they could easily break your arm. You know, a lot of those moves are extremely real. You know what I mean? It's just, you know, you're trained to not inflict the damage that you could. So and yet
show that it's, you know, and make it look very real. That's an art right there. That's an art form.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you know, I was showed very fast that there's a lot of work that needs to go into this, and you know, I was at a point where I was so obsessed with it, you know, that I went through everything that they threw at me. But it was a hard road, I'm not gonna lie. You know, it was a really big test of how much I wanted it at the time. And some guys they fall off that because it's really hard. Just like bodybuilding would be. You know what I mean? You can't expect to just go to the gym once, twice a week and be a world champion. It doesn't work like that. You got to put the time and the graft in for anything you do like that. It's like you said, you're on stage, you're making it look good, you're making it look easy, but there's a lot behind that. A lot of sacrifice and everything else that people don't see.
The average person that has no clue, either in the sport that you're in wrestling or bodybuilding, I hear things like, you know, that doesn't look like it's so hard to do. How come, you know, you have no idea, and we're not going to talk about this because you'll never get it unless you actually have to go through it, you know?
Right.
And I still have a studio. I've had several studios, and I still have one. I sit in the personal training side of it. Okay. I opened up my own places and you know, and I've had people come through and say, oh, I want to compete. And I sit down with them now and say, look, here's the reality of this thing. Because I know from my own personal experiences that you like the idea of it more than you're going to like the reality of doing this. You know, you said 9 to 5. You actually were spending 9 in the morning till 5 in the
Oh,
evening?
yeah, it might have been 8. I
Every
just
day?
remember it was like 5 days a week. Yeah, we go to
Holy
this
smokes.
place in Florida. We'd go there. We'd set up a ring. We'd do warm up drills for like an hour. We'd have like promo classes. Talking, you kind of promo. You watch everyone talk. You critique each other. Then we'd have matches. Then we'd watch videos after that. It was continuous learning, and I was a big fan of the WWF and the WWE. But if you remember, there was another product which was called WCW. I wasn't
Yeah,
really versed with that a whole bunch. So one of the things, just which I feel is really important in the bodybuilding world as well, is it's great to know everyone who's there today, but it's really important to study the past as well.
sure.
And that was a really big aspect of professional wrestling. They really pushed that on you. Is, yeah, great, you're a fan of today, but it's really important for you to know the people who have paved your future. So
That's smart.
go back and study those who've come before you. And that was something that really hit home, and we had to do that very,
Yeah.
very often. So it was a lot of time we had to put in, and even when we came home to our families and stuff, it was kind of like being in school, because we had homework to do, and then we had to go back the next day and then prove that we'd done that. We were tested on it. So
Amazing.
it was a big deal.
Yeah. So when you're at that point, but like, let's just say before you get signed, I'm assuming you got signed to a contract to be a pro.
Yeah.
But when you're learning to get to that point, how can you put that much time in and still work and still make money, before you get discovered as a pro? Because I'm assuming once you get signed by the WWE, for example, now you're under contract. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So what about before that happens?
Yeah. I was one of the very, very lucky people. Maybe a lot of people on the independent don't like me saying that of wrestling, because I don't know whether you've ever seen the film The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke.
I absolutely have.
You have. Okay. Well, that's a really good film for multiple reasons, because the way the professional wrestling is portrayed in that film is very true. A lot of wrestlers on the independent circuit have to go that route, and it's a hard ownership where, a lot of guys, they travel, 200-300 miles for very minimalistic wage to do the show. And, they'll get the hell beat out of them just to get somewhat experience in the professional wrestling world, in the hope that one day they'll get discovered. And that's how a lot of professional wrestlers actually made their way to the big stage. And that includes some of the legends as well that people don't even realize.
Yeah.
I was one of the few that was very, very lucky to get where I did on another road. So, again, like I said to you, I tried to send off footage and everything else that didn't work. And then it was just the case of being in the right place at the right time. And then I was trained from knowing absolutely nothing at all about professional wrestling other than everything else that I saw. So, that's where it's a plus and it's a disadvantage, because obviously when I'm taught everything that they want me to, I don't really develop any bad habits, as where all these other guys on the independent circuit, they might have bad habits in the ring and stuff where they need to sort of restructure that. So it's a hard industry to get into, it really is. It's a very hard industry.
Yeah. Like a lot of them are, but that what a way to make a living. You pay an awful price. I mean, listen, if it's something that you want to do more than anything else, you're willing to pay that price. And that's just the way it is. And there's consequences for that. And there's trade-offs. And most people don't really understand that, when they say, how in the world, Rob, can you go down that road and get the hell beat out of you day in and day out, make no money at it? What's wrong with you? You're not normal. I bet you heard that a few times.
And again, I'll relate that to bodybuilding and professional wrestling. They're very, very similar. You get these guys who compete in the amateur shows. There's no money you're going to get other than a trophy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You're spending all this money to compete and everything else. It's just a hard road, in the hope that one day you're on a stage and that you are shining bright and you get that pro status, and then you make your way. You know what I mean? It's the same sort of thing.
It is
right there and then, you know. So
it absolutely is.
That's why I have such an understanding of not really what you're doing, it's why you're doing it. It's for something more internal than just, you know what I mean? Like you were saying, you're talking to your clients and saying, why do you want to do this?
Yep.
It has to be something that's very, very close to your heart and very, very passionate with yourself.
Yeah, that's for sure. Or you can't do it. You can't do it.
No, you can't. You can't. You'll give up. It's so easy to give up.
Yeah. I talk about, and I do these podcasts and I do Instagram posts, and I talk about this. And I say, you know, the motivation has to be greater than the obstacle. And it ties into exactly what you're saying, because that means you got that passion. You got to be willing to do the work. You got to do that extra step, not just 1 day, 2 days a week. It's like all the time.
It never stops.
No. And who in the hell wants to do that? It's a very small percentage of people that do the wrestling sport as well as the bodybuilding and any kind of sport that has this kind of, the NFL football. Those guys are, awful. It's a big price that you got to pay. So it's you've got to understand that, and it's hard to do that, But I'm curious to know the guys that are in the WWE. How important is training? Are these guys are all in a weight training program, and how important is nutrition?
From my understanding, it's a lot more aware. There's a lot more awareness, especially now. From my understanding, the training facility moved from Tampa. Now it's in Orlando, and all the guys, they get assigned trainers. And I'm pretty sure they have full access to nutrition plans and stuff like that. Although, in my opinion, there aren't too many guys in the industry today who are as impactful as they were back in the day.
Really?
But again, the industry has changed. Like, for example, the Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, all these guys who had the bodies, you know what I mean? They're just like, wow. I really can't think of too many in the industry right now that have that. And it's just.
Why do you think that is?
I tell you a cool story. What with that actually affected was in 2000. I can't remember what year it was, but it's a sad story to say the least. But if there was a wrestler called Chris Benoit, and I don't know if you remember that, but he was a very famous wrestler with the WWE. And at the time, whatever happened, it was on the news, and it was very, very sad. Where I guess they said he killed his wife and he killed his child, and then he hung himself on his gym equipment, right?
Oh,
so that was a really, really, really big downward spiral for the professional wrestling industry right there.
Yeah.
So that's where there was a really, really stringent placement on sort of being drug tested.
Yeah.
So that's when they started going to natural bodybuilding shows, and that's where they found me. So that was the only reason why I got assigned, was because they changed their hiring tactics. So I think when I got hired with these guys, then I was drug tested like 2 to 3 to 4 times a week. You know what I mean? When all these guys when we first got hired, because it wasn't only for like anabolic use or like recreational drug use or anything.
Yeah.
So they'd screen us constantly. So I think that's one of the main reasons is because it's like natural bodybuilding now, where all these guys in the industry today are tested constantly. Yeah. So maybe back in the day where they were slightly more lenient, and you had these huge guys, it's not really seen a whole bunch these days.
Right.
So.
Well, listen, wrestling made a good choice, because it was going to ruin their industry if they didn't make some kind of move.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Talking about guys, and I'm sure you know who this guy is. You remember Haystack Calhoun?
Yes.
That guy, I know for sure he wasn't concerned about his nutrition. He didn't do any weight training, right? Oh my! I can't believe that I even remember that. That goes so far. When was that? When they were that was what, 60s maybe?
I think so.
Holy crap, man! I remember. Yeah. But they had guys more that were, well, it's just like even like with powerlifting. Guys back when they were earlier days, they came in, they were carrying a lot more body fat than they are now. So it's obviously they have modified their diet and everything. So you ended up in the what got you into the INBA? Am I saying that right? INPA?
Yeah, so the INBA, that was something that I really was drawn to and aspired to. When I was in the professional wrestling circus, we do some really cool trade shows, and they take a few of the wrestlers, and we went to the Arnold Classic.
Oh, yeah.
And that I was in my element, because now I'm in the bodybuilding world, and I'm representing the wrestling world. So I in my mind, I've drawn the two things together, and I'm there.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm just in my element, full stop. And I went to go see one of my good friends, Jesse Godders, who's a Big Brother star, and he was there with a company, and the company was Vitago, I believe, and one of the athletes that they sponsored was a guy called Kiyoshi Moody, who was the reigning 7-time Mr. Olympia, 6 or 7 time, I'm not sure. So I remember looking at this guy's poster, and as a lifetime natural guy, I'm looking at this guy, this guy looks incredible, he looks amazing. And then I look down and it says his title, Natural Mr. Olympia. And I'm like, that's massive. That's everything to me.
Yeah.
So I kind of kept that in my mind, and I went away and I started researching it. And I was like, I've won all these bodybuilding titles and everything else, but like, to be the natural Mr. Olympia would be a monumental thing for me.
Yeah.
So I remember contacting the INBA and really just trying to work out a time for me to compete, or asking them how I could compete. A lot of their shows are on the sort of the coast of California and everything else over there. So it was just a challenge for me to get qualified to compete at the Olympia.
Yeah.
So I think it was 1 year I contacted them, and that didn't work out because I was wrestling and conflicts of schedule and everything else. And then the year after that, I did my first show, and that was an absolute scramble, because I remember competing in the Team USA's, which was a whirlwind show for me. I ended up winning everything I entered there, and I actually won my pro status, and I qualified for the Natural Olympia. So that was just amazing. And then I went on to the Natural Olympia, and I won my first title there.
Yeah.
As Natural Mr. Olympia. So that was just a dream come true, just right there for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you won that thing twice, right? You came back this time defending your title for the third time, right?
Yeah. Yes, I did. That was my third time. I got second in this show to an absolute gentleman.
Oh, man.
Philip Ricardo Jr.
Yeah.
Him and I we've been messaging, a little bit on social media and whatnot. And, I knew he was a nice guy.
Yeah.
Some of my friends who have met him, and they tell me what a nice guy he is. But it was really cool to compete with him at the Natural Olympia, because, see him firsthand, how much of a nice guy he is and how much of a great representation he is of natural bodybuilding was just amazing. He's such a good guy.
Totally.
I could really consider him as a brother.
Yeah. I mean, and Rob, the funny thing is when I got back into the industry again in the bodybuilding world after about a 13 or 14 year layoff, because we did our stuff in the 90s, and so my first, and I did events like the Olympia, not competing in them. At this point, I had booths and I was promoting my product, so I did the Olympia, I did Arnold Classic and all that. And so my first way back in was to podcasts like we're doing now, because I'm interviewing people who I think are just the real deal, and I want to get your views and everybody's, And when I was there at this Natural Olympia, I didn't know what to think, man, because it was like something's different here than what it was like in my old days. It's like Then it was like it started hitting me. It's like, okay, it's about the camaraderie. I can see that the athletes they're engaged with each other. They're doing this for the love of the sport, and I just felt that the energy was just amazing for me. And I really believe that where you're at in this natural movement is the absolute right place to be. And I think that this it's gotten a lot bigger. I mean, a lot bigger.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. It's, first of all, I've competed with quite a few natural federations, and they've all been great. But just working with the IMBA, PMBA, and just attending their shows, and just they put on a great show. Number one, they really put so much effort into everything they do, and I'm very thankful for what they do.
Yeah.
But then you've got all the athletes, and obviously I'm one of the athletes, but it's just, I feel like you're saying, I feel a sense of community with them.
Yeah.
And every event that I do, it is different, you know what I mean? And I know what you're saying, where you go to shows and bodybuilders are just eyeing up other bodybuilders, and there's not much contact, and it's like, it's me versus you. But I have a dynamic on that, and it's like I'm competing against myself for 16 or 12 weeks. Okay, it's just me versus me every single day that I wake up, to do the very best I can, make the very best choices I can do in my day to get closer to the goal that I've set. Once I step foot in the arena, or I'm at the hotel and I'm around athletes I'm competing against or not, it's really out of my hands, because all I'm doing then is I'm putting on a professional show to be the best ambassador I can of natural bodybuilding, full stop. But secondly, it's nothing's really going to happen. Nothing's really going to place me better by just not speaking to you or anything like that.
Right.
And that, I think every single competitor has that same mindset, where it's like all the hard work has been done. Yes, we're still going to put the presentation on that we have to do, but it's like, we're all a family, and you feel that. So and I think we had a huge lineup of 30 guys, and I can remember from start to finish, every single one of us was talking with each other. We were all having fun. We all congratulate each other and everything else, and it was just a great camaraderie between all of us, and it's been like that for me every single year. It's absolutely phenomenal. I think that's what the industry needs. You know what I mean? It's really important to have that.
Yeah, I would say that it's not that, the industry definitely needs that. And you guys are fantastic ambassadors. I never met so many people that were so good for the sport. And I couldn't believe it, Rob, to be honest with you. I was like, this is too good to be true. Sure. And, and I even told Danny, I'm sure that Danny and Denise and the whole family. And I told Danny, I told him after the show was over, even before that, because he came to my booth, I said, I want to be a part of this now that I'm coming back into the industry again. I want to be right in the middle of all this, because this is awesome. This is the place to be. And I'm that guy that came from the other side, I'll call it that, where I competed in those organizations. And I know that the difference. And I tell you what, you and you're a great ambassador. You're very smart in the way that you're thinking in terms of you're competing against yourself. And that's exactly 100% right. You worry about you, because it's a type of sport to begin with that it's subjective, and you're going to have judges. It's like, ice skating and not. And if you go in with any other attitude, that doesn't mean that you're not highly competitive, because you are.
Right. Yeah.
And if you go in with any other attitude, I can guarantee you that sport is going to disappoint you, because you got your priorities in the wrong spot,
And, something that was a little different, something that I feel that a lot of other athletes need to work on maybe is something that, everyone wants to work on the physical side. Everyone wants to look great in the day. But again, you really hit that point home where you said bodybuilding is a subjective sport, And I think so many people get crushed when they don't get that place in that they think, that they deserve. So what I, people always ask me advice, what advice would I give to people? One of the biggest things I can give is put a goal out there, what you want to achieve, and give yourself that amount of time. Whether it's 12 weeks, like I said, it's 16, 18 weeks, it doesn't matter. If you did a show last year, like I said, try and get a goal. Like for me, it was to come in really, really good condition. I feel like I won because I achieved that. That's so impossible to train your mind, because at the end of the day, win, lose, or draw, you are a winner. You know what I mean? If you've done that, if you followed the prep all the way through, so many people get disheartened, and obviously, I would have loved to have won my third Mr. Olympia there. But again, I was up against crazy, tremendous competition. And I knew that, all 30 of the guys were amazing. Yeah. But, I really did feel a sense of accomplishment, because I achieved something very direct that I said to myself, before I started my prep. And I think that's what a lot of people should do, is really call themselves out and say, hey, I need to, have bigger legs going into the show. And if you achieve that, then you did it. You know
That's
what I mean?
right. That's right.
Bodybuilding is something more than just, that title and everything else. It's an internal thing that you need to be at peace with yourself.
Yep.
So it's going to be hard for me when I step on stage next time, because I've got to look at the package that I brought this past Olympia, and I've got to try and find a way to bring a better one for the next one. So that's kind of my dilemma, and what I need to sort of come to terms with and really sort of target myself for that next show.
I tell people all the time, I said, bodybuilding, and I was an athlete most of my life, football, basketball, the American sports, but bodybuilding taught me lessons that those other sports couldn't teach me, and so the challenge in itself is what drove me to bodybuilding. The fact that it was so damn hard to do what you're going to try to do for the fourth time up there, that part of that was like, okay, this is a huge obstacle, but at the same time, it's the thing that's driving me, because it's like someone telling me you can't do this. I play these games in my head. So, but listen, I want to thank you for coming on to the show today. But I have to tell you, not only are you an amazing competitor, your body looks phenomenal, and I commend you. But I think even more importantly, you're an amazing person, and
thank you.
The sport needs a lot more of what we saw at Las Vegas, and you are a great ambassador. And I'm really happy and proud that I know you. Seriously.
Thank you very much, Leo. It was an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, man. You take care. And
Happy New Year to you, my friend.
Same to you. Talk soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Serious Growth Podcast. For more episodes like the one you just listened to, subscribe to us on your mobile podcast app and leave us a review. If you'd like to reach out, you can find us online at seriousgrowth.com. Until next time, train smart and train hard.